Welcome. So I'm Peter O'Donoghue, consultingrevenue.com. And the session that we're in today is how to get your next 5 consulting clients. Timing wise is the content piece up the front end, because I need to give you the context of everything that we're doing. I'm a little bit different than Maven. They call it a lightning lesson. You've got to come in this 15 minutes. But I think that if you can't work your way through a substantial piece of content and grasp different ideas, then you're going to struggle being a successful consultant. So, I put this together specifically. Let me double. Hey, there is. Thank you very much. I'll work out how to I'll turn off the notifications next time I ask for a question. So what we're going to look at is how to get your next 5 consulting clients. So my main aim for us is to provide the easiest way for any B2B consultant, regardless of your current momentum, to win the next 5 consulting clients and make more from them than they ever dreamed possible. And once you've done that, once you're 100% confident you can do it again and again and again, there will be hot seat workshops and Q&As. Later, we'll do the content piece. But what I implore you to do is, if you get a question about a content piece, drop it in the Q&A. I won't deal with it there and then. I mean, you tell from the gray hair, I like to keep one focus. But that gives me a thread to come back to. And even if I don't do it on this session, then I can come back to you and do it one-on-one. So don't leave it to your memory. Don't write it down on a notebook. Write it down in the chat thread. And then I can come back to it. I've got a thread I can come back on. And if you see some of these things are applicable for you, or you're thinking, that sounds great, but what if my situation is different? Stick around for the hot seat, and I'll unmute you, get your video open if you want to, and we can look at the practical application in your business, and then obviously open Q&A. What I need from you, again, is ask questions in the chat thread. I'll answer in the hot seat, but don't be passive. Every now and again, I'm going to ask a question. Let me know you're alive. Just play to my fragile ego, and then, answer in the chat. This is not a one-way thing. Consultants, I've been dealing with consultants, working with consultants predominantly for about 15 years. I tend to find they're quite passive, in today's economy. You've got to step up. And what I ask that of you now in how you present yourself on this session is, if I ask a question, just drop a yes or a no, or yeah, I get it in the thread. Okay, so why be proactive right now? So this was something that I saw last week from FPI Insight, looking at the 5-year trend currently in professional services. So not just consulting, professional services as a bucket. And you look at it, 2023, employee billable utilization is down. 2024, it's down again. Revenue growth is down. But again, this is a big bucket across professional services. But it might be a wake-up call for you to maybe think about doing something different than you are currently doing, or that you are already doing. So why be proactive now? McKinsey have laid off at least 2,000 people, and it's not just in their junior areas. KPMG have laid off over 1,000, again, not just in their junior areas. PwC have laid off over 2,000, again, not just in junior areas. Deloitte, the same. And this one was unheard of. EY have laid off senior partners, and with some of them have transferred their incentives to non-equity. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, probably even a lot more. There are a high percentage of those I would suggest are going to be looking to come into the market, grow boutiques or be solo consultants. And I know, because I've worked with a lot of people transitioning out of the big companies, that they do find it tough. So you may have a brilliant advantage, but it's not just that. Layoffs, over 150,000 job cuts across, and that's just one statistic. But there's some really amazing skilled people joining the jobs market. And I would suggest a high percentage of those might feel that now is the right time to start a boutique consultancy, become a day rate contractor, become a solo contractor. So while the demand seems, by many, I'm not saying I agree with it, to be shrinking, the people coming into consultancy seem to be more than ever before. But with all of that, meanwhile, people are flourishing. So this is Stepan. It was just something I came across on LinkedIn. It's not a client of mine. I left Deloitte recently to start my own boutique consultancy. The opportunity around us with AI, I could do in 1 hour what it used to take me at least a week to do in a big consultancy. And I've highlighted there just something I put a very positive comment on there. And it's if we ever work together, I'll show you the power of commenting as a way of getting visibility and awareness in a marketplace. So I've got 1,900 impressions just on a positive comment. It's more than most people's LinkedIn posts make. But I must say, most of this is not about LinkedIn. I'm going to show you some more old school and proactive business development approaches that are not reliant on LinkedIn. But with all of this, great potential in front of us, it's infinitely harder than ever before if you don't have a plan to acquire clients. Again, so I looked at it and said, okay, so what's the current marketplace for consulting and boutiques? And obviously I go to the source now for something like Perplexity, surging revenue and market share. 82% of boutique consulting firms reporting revenue growth. Smaller firms are recognized for the speed, adaptability, and ability to integrate disruptive technology, value for money. So there's a brilliant positive outlook if you can just grab your piece of it. Agility and value, expanding future for small, focused boutique consultancies. And what I'm going to show you is, as I said, one of the quickest and easiest ways to get your first 5 clients or your next 5 clients. Because what I typically find is people will start a boutique, they'll get 1 or 2 clients on board through their relationship. About 18 months in, they'll hit this wall period where work suddenly starts to dry up, and it's because they've done nothing to build the pipeline over that period. And I don't want that for you. Even in the UK, the demand for consultancy services is experiencing phenomenal growth, particularly in the UK, digital transformation, technology adoption. So there is a huge amount of opportunity. Even consultancies face a talent crunch as demand outpaces supply. Again, massive, massive opportunity. But where does proactive business development fit into this? If you take a proactive business development approach, it's going to shorten your sales cycles by starting high trust, value-led conversations with senior buyers, bypasses bloated marketing funnels and goes direct to decision makers and or champions who are ready to act and hopefully ready to act now. It helps you land bigger deals by positioning you as a strategic advisor, not just another vendor. And it helps you reclaim some control if you've ever felt recently a little bit helpless about how you're doing your client acquisition. When you are being more proactive, you can drive the narrative and guide the sales process a little bit more on your terms. And it taps into your warm network and turns dormant contacts into active opportunities. But firstly, I want to break a myth, because this one's been nagging at me for years. And there's this myth that, look, your advisors and professional services and consultants can't be proactive. And one of the stories that people tell to propagate this myth is, well, you wouldn't go with a brain surgeon or a plastic surgeon that cold calls you. But I mean, this is just a ridiculous concept. It's ridiculous because, one, it's not applicable to what we do, but even secondly, it's not true. If a brain surgeon was watching a TV interview and he happened to notice a different pallor, a slight change in the skin color of someone being interviewed, a way that there was just a little twitch in the corner of their eye, maybe a slurred speech, they knew very early symptoms of a problem that was going to happen in a couple of months, what do you think that brain surgeon would do? Of course, he would make every possible effort to get in contact with the TV station, to get in contact with that individual and say, hey, look, I don't know how relevant this is to you, but it appears that you may be suffering some symptoms of a deep-rooted potential challenge to you in the future. Why don't we take a look at it? So, and I'm a massive advocate of dispelling this myth, because I've seen so many amazing consultants almost paralyzed by fear of being seen to be proactive in the marketplace. One particularly, he needed clients now, but he was going to write a book, get it published, and do a book tour to get in front of the right CEOs that he thought were going to, come to his book tour, which, he planned on taking 2 years. But when I spoke to him, he said, well, I need the business now. And it's like, well, what if you do something different to go and get that business right now? And that's what we did. Okay, so what are we going to learn on this lesson? So you get clarity on the overlooked, underutilized assets that you absolutely have that you can use to turn into clients quickly. You get a campaign walkthrough that I co-created that helped generate over £35 million for a UK technology company in pipeline opportunities in less than 8 weeks, and how you can model it for your business, but then also a repeatable playbook for getting 5 consulting clients. And I say that because, I've spoken to hundreds of consultants, and typically their goal, their long-term vision is 5 consulting clients. That's what they're looking to generate, whether that's, in one go, annually, but that's always a repeatable number in 30 to 90 days without damaging your reputation or your positioning. Okay, so a question for you. If getting consulting clients is so important to the health and future of your business and your financial prosperity, doesn't it feel right to focus on getting better at business development to get clients? Do you agree? Put a yes or a no in the comments. Let me know. Does it feel right to you to focus on getting better at business development to get clients? Just going to have a look at the comments here. Yes. So John, Rolf, Santosh, Liam, absolutely. Adam, yes, absolutely. Good. So you're with me. So that's absolutely fantastic. It feels right, but we're mostly a ball of emotion with a touch of logic thrown in. So what makes sense and feels right to do and what you're currently doing rarely line up. So especially if you're struggling with deal flow and then the knock-on effect, struggling possibly financially. Because I've heard all the excuses in the world from consultants, trust me. So there's some obstacles that might stand in your way. Money. So a little bit like Jorn. So Jorn came to me years ago. So I think this was probably about, it says on it, 2016. So he was working for a consultancy and they wouldn't invest in business development training or assistance. So he paid personally for my help, but after that, he didn't have a lot to work with. So we implemented quite a low cost business development program with him. And he was amazed. I loved getting these emails back. It was like, wow, the COO of big African airline writes to me, sorry for making you wait. That's crazy. Still replies coming in, all of them positive, even from the COO of Lufthansa Group, making his managers reply, man, this is crazy. So it doesn't take a lot of money to invest in business development for yourself. Okay, what about time? So this one really cuts into my heart like a knife, because if you really understand the power that business development gives you, you'd realize it actually gives you back time. And if you could prove that to yourself, would you vow to the world to become better at business development? I would hope that's a resounding yes, I would. Look, I tried to get ChatGPT to create a replica or something like this photo, but it said it wouldn't allow it. I'm not going to blow smoke up your backside. That is not my style. There is too many people on LinkedIn say, how to create, end a supply of consulting clients in as little as 20 minutes a day. Rubbish. I've got the gray hair. I've been there. I understand that if you don't have a strong proactive business development acumen right now, you are going to have to invest some time to do it. But once you crack it, it will save you an exponential amount of time out in the future. Okay, so what about no offer? So again, it's just an excuse. This is Dr. Peter Williams. He was CEO of Alpha, which was the innovation and spin-out lab of Telefonica. So when he worked with me, so he is a client, or was a client, is a client every now and again. But when he came to me, he had never consulted before. So we ran a process called client insight interviews, which is very much like the B2B version of the VOC, the voice of customer. And he went through and interviewed his network. And I will say he is unusual because he had also been one of the head of people development for Telefonica. So he mentored the emerging leaders who had gone out and started working for, some of the global organizations. So he did have an amazing network. So he ran this process. He had no hard and fast offer. He went out and interviewed his network, found out what they were struggling with, what the challenges were, and created his offer around that. And essentially went back and offered them what they said they needed. So if you don't have a strong, compelling consulting offer right now, then that is no excuse for being proactive. And I'll, if you ever work with me, if you come on the cohort, this is a sort of a bit of a teaser for, then you get handed the client insight interview process as part of that. And then we have no network. So this is, again, a little bit of an older testimony. So Michael Whelan. So Michael had an executive placement and recruitment and consultancy. He lived in Beijing at the time, targeting US manufacturers that were looking to relocate into the state. But he ended up in Beijing via marriage and lots of other things. But he had no network strong in the manufacturing organizations that were still left in the States. But that didn't stop him doing proactive business development and generating a 600K pipeline in under 60 days. So I'm showing you these because all of your excuses should crumble by the wayside when you really grasp what business development can do for you. And fear, as I said, most consultants fear grasping this proactivity. So this is Andy. So this was the end of April. I'm doing this now in May. This was last month. So Andy's a current client. He says, I ran the client insight interview process, which is what Dr. Pete ran earlier. I did it via my network multiplier list, which is another process that I show about how you get all of your networks. And I'll talk to you about this in a second. All the people in your network together, and the client insight interview is the contact process. But this is the heartwarming. This is no multi-million-pound win or anything like that. This is really giving me motivation to keep going with reaching out to people. The way I look at it is like, if you do something and you do it once, that should give you the belief and the process to know you can do it again and again and again. And again, I know this. A lot of people on your, well, I've read this book. I've read some of Alan Weiss. I've read this. I've done this. But knowing it and implement it aren't always the same thing. But I just want to give you an insight. So Robert was a client. So in this interview, he said, I reached out to Peter because we were targeting, I was quite experienced in marketing, but we were targeting more senior people who were downloading white papers. And the work we did with Peter generated a high volume of very senior people that we needed to get into our pipeline. And it helped to shorten the sales cycle. And actually, they've gone on, I think they'd exited the business that it was relevant to. So why I'm saying that I know this is because Robert wrote the book on inbound marketing. He's the author of Feed a Starving Crowd. But he could put his ego to one side and reach out to help when he needed it, when he saw a blind spot. So don't let these obstacles stand in your way. And then the other one that I see is I'm too shy or I don't have the right personality. The business developers come in all shapes and sizes, introverts, extroverts, creators, analytical. Would you just entertain the idea that business development is personality independent, and much more important than personality is the desire to serve and add value? Let me ask you a question. Do you wish to serve more, add more value, and in return, earn more? I'm hoping so. So now you've got preempted some of the blockages out of the way. I want to show you the 5 client's framework that we'll go through. So 4 parts to the framework: the right frame, the right people, the sprint activator, and then the connect consistently. So the right frame is all about getting you to the right place for revenue. The right people is also looking at getting in front of people that can make a decision. The sprint activator is about momentum, and then connect consistently is all about compounding. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to take a quick breath. Fantastic. I love the way that that is shaping up. So I'm going to go through is walk through each slither of this 4-part framework. So you've seen the what and now the who. So my name is Peter O'Donoghue, and I've done a lot of things. So that's me. I currently live in Wales, in Cardiff, in the UK. I'm a husband and a father. That little live wire on my shoulders is kind of my pride and my joy. He's challenging. He makes me understand what it is to be human. And I love him to bits as I work. So I'm the founder of Consulting Revenue. And prior to that, I've worked in B2B sales, either operating or training or teaching or consulting for probably 25, maybe even 30 years. So I had a sales training business called Sales DNA, where I taught consultative selling, telesales. And this was prior to, well, in fact, I used to sell before the internet. I'm a dinosaur. So I grew a sales training business. And probably if we ever chat in a different place, I'll tell you the story that I learned search engine optimization and then built a brand around. I was ranked for every search term in the UK for sales training, telesales Cardiff, Edinburgh, everything. And that's how I got my business. And then overnight, Google wiped it out. So, it's a preemptive story about not relying on one source of business, referrals. And I then transitioned to a more productized consulting business, working with SaaS and enterprise technology, building outbound sales processes. And by a fluke, really, I transitioned into working with consultants because a Cardiff-based consultancy wanted me to become the interim business development director. And I looked at all this stuff that I'd done for the last 10, 15 years in technology and thought, oh man, if you applied that to consulting, you could absolutely make a killing. And we did with that consulting business. We later exited in an industry roll-up. I'm an MBA in e-commerce, biobehavior. So I did consulting programs at EMC, Epicor, New Voice Media, Brightpearl. And kind of the geeky stuff. I competed in the 2002 Cup Around the World Yacht Race. I'm a PADI Master Scuba Diver trainer and rather large belly mountain biker. So that's me. And, I love this one. And I think this says more about me than kind of the bullet points on that. So Scott was a client a few years back. You could spend days cobbling together a patchwork system and hope it works. You won't find a more responsive person who's more committed to making your business work than Peter O'Donoghue. So I hope it gives you some, settles about, so who's this guy rambling on before we get into the content. So the right frame, I'm going to introduce you to the 80-20 rule, the not Nanny McPhee principle, and green light selling, because you can control most of the variables with which a potential client can invest with you or not. If you understand these principles, and you can easily create your next 5 consulting clients. And the TLDR, if you're down with the kids today, is, look, don't do anything to purposely make your life hard. And I'm going to show you that. So there's some great books around about, being unique, the challenge of customers, about creating this new position. The Category Pirate is about category design. And, and I love these. I'm an avid reader, but I think there's a risk when you start applying these, certainly in solo and smaller boutique consultancies, about trying to be revolutionary. And then you've got, unicorns. So the whole thing about the unicorn growth is being this thing that no one's ever done before and being completely new and unique. And especially if you're coming into AI consulting or, if you're moving into that from SaaS, realistically in B2B consulting, that's one of the worst things you can possibly do, with some caveats, unless you have a big cash runway in front of you and a high level of skill. So if you shouldn't do that, what should you do? Especially if you're targeting larger businesses, so moving away from mom and pop and SMBs and entrepreneurial style smaller businesses, if you're targeting mid-market and enterprise, you should be putting yourself in a box that's 80% known and proven, that they have bought before. Therefore, they have a process to buy what you sell and a neat little box to compartmentalize what you are. Now, that doesn't mean you can't control the frame of the box. That's a story for another webinar. But you have to create this, it's well known, it's not unique, it's not groundbreaking, it's not earth-shattering. Because most large and mid to larger organizations don't have a context or a process to buy them. So if you have an internal champion, they're going to find it hard. If you're coming in from outside cold. So you've got to look at a way about how can you push yourself into the 80% known and proven that they bought before with a 20% different and unique wrapper around it. That's enough to justify the why you. Is it because you're quicker, you're cheaper, or you have a unique framework? And I'm going to show you an AI solution later that might help you with that productized framework. Is it your results, your track record, many different ways? But don't try and be too clever and too unique, because you will put barriers and impediments in your own way. So that's part one of the right frame. Then you are not Nanny McPhee. So Nanny McPhee, if you've not heard of it, it's a beautiful kids film. And it's this matriarchal magical nanny that comes in. And her phrase is, when you need me, but do not want me, then I must stay. But she has magic powers. I don't think many of you here do. So this screenshot on the left was from an application to work with me from a solo consultant. And when I asked, what's the number one thing you want help with? Selling a proposition that addresses a problem that costs many tens of millions in major programs and projects. The solution is needed, but not wanted by those immediately in charge. So why make your life difficult if you are small or a boutique consultancy by trying to educate the world? And don't get me wrong. So this consultant had never really originated big projects before. They'd worked on them, but had never originated them. They didn't have a large cash runway out in front of them, and they didn't have a high skill level in changing beliefs and how you can do that in individuals, in an organization, or even in an industry. And they didn't have time. So, why would you make your life difficult and do this if you don't have to? So the third part of that is green light selling. Part of the frame, really, especially if you're starting out or growing, what you want to be doing is focusing on decision-making relationships and enter into a conversation. Ask smart questions around symptoms, problems, and goals. And I tend to have a battle with my clients around symptoms and problems, because most of my clients are experts at what they do, and they can immediately see the underlying problem, but the client sees the symptoms. So you have to start by talking about the symptoms, enter the conversation that's going on in your potential client's head. Once you get into the conversation, start asking smart questions, you can inject yourself into the organization as part of the solution of projects they have already green lit. That is your fastest path to traction, expansion, getting into larger deals, bigger deals, shorter sales cycles, without trying to make you the world's best consultative salesperson, all of that, which is possible, but don't make your life difficult. So the solution is whatever it takes, especially if you're in your first year of consulting. So the right frame. So here's 3 smart questions and a bonus one. So look, really, really simple, and they're very easy. And because they're too easy, I know many of you won't use them. When you are in conversations with people in an organization, what projects have been greenlit for the next 6 to 24 months? Yeah. What has already got sign off? What are you doing? And then now you're thinking about how can I inject myself into those projects that you don't have to originate? How confident are you that they will hit the objectives set out for them? Yeah. Especially on a personal level, what are people fearful that won't happen in those projects? What's the impact on you if they don't? And a bonus fourth is, look, if I had ideas to help reduce the risks of this project missing its goals, would you be open to hearing them? Simple. 4 questions. If you routinely ask these in conversations, you will get significantly more traction, even if you're really doing well at the moment. And they are very, very simple. I try not to overcomplicate things if I can help them. And then you have a bridge. Once you're in those type of conversations, if you drop something like this in, and I've been using this for 15, 20 years, because once you have one thing that's working for you, keep to it. So, Steve, it sounds like you're facing some challenges around the prevailing pain point, and that might result in, we're edging here. We're not being, you're going to get this problem. No, you can even edge it a little bit more if you like. So, Steve, it sounds like you might be facing some challenges and, in that area, and that might result in what the negative consequences. And, I might have some ideas that may help mitigate the risks on this project. Would it make sense if I go away, put my thinking cap on, maybe with my team, and come back with some new insights? No, there's no question mark at the end of this because it's framed as a question, but it's not a question. How are you fixed next Wednesday at 3? If you ended every conversation you had in a networking meeting, at a conference, an exhibition, with a transition with something like that, well, I guarantee the number of projects that you will be injecting yourself into will be significantly more than you're doing right now. So we've got the right frame, the 80-20 rule, the not naming fee, and the green light selling. So question mark, if you could get into conversations with the right people in a company, don't you think it's feasible that you can identify more or green light projects that you could inject yourself into with enthusiasm? So let me know in the comments. Let me know you're still alive. Let me know you're still here. If you could get into conversations with the right people in a company, now you've kind of seen maybe a different perspective on it. Do you think it's feasible that you can identify green light projects that you could inject yourself into? Good. So there's still some life in the chat. I love that. I will come back and review them. But thank you so much for taking part. Because most consultants live on the sidelines, and I know it because I see it. So please keep engaging. So then we got phase 2, the right people. So when you get laser focused on the right people, the entire sales process speeds up, and the path to that 5 clients, because that's the promise of this kind of training and the workshop cohort that comes after it, becomes something that you can confidently lean into. So I'm going to give you a snapshot. I'm going to show you the bullseye, the network multiplier, signals, inflections, and all of that leads to decision. But the overarching mentality that I want you to grasp is, how do I target the right people? Is, what can I talk about with buyers I can easily reach? Because some of these things I'm going to show you might be a little bit more alien to you than others. You only need one of the things that I'm going to show you to really work and sweat, and that will generate more than 5 clients for you. So it's about, what can I talk about with buyers I can easily reach? Okay, so there's layers of the right people. So right at the bottom here, we've got the bullseye method. Then we've got past offers and ghosts. I'll touch on that a little bit today, but there's a way of activating, people that you've made offers to and have ghosted you. There's your warm network. There's what I call signals and inflection points. And they're kind of up to there is what we're covering today. Then we've got named account and ideal client profile. And then we've got authority marketing. And, it really saddens me because most of the people trying to teach consultants at the moment, all they're teaching is authority marketing, and which predominantly rests on LinkedIn And, there's so much more, I'm pleased that I was pre-internet. Because, oh man, we were resourceful back then, and when you bring some of that into what you can do nowadays, the results are absolutely phenomenal. So let me introduce you a little bit to one of those methods, and I call it the bullseye method. And there's lots of layers to it, but I just want to give you some of the playbooks for it. So, bullseye method. It works if you have got a client. Yeah. So if you're not a virgin consultant and not worked, this process isn't going to work for you. But if you had some clients, certainly within the last 12, 18, 24 months, the absolute first thing that you should do is look at that client, especially if you originated it and finished it off. Because when you originate it, you should be see there, like, I think we can reduce the widget manufacturing process from, X to Y, and that should save you Z over the term. If you then go back after your 6 months or whatever it is and say, look, we said we would do this, but we did this, and the result was this, you've now got tangibility there. So you can then take that and go, okay, so who else can we approach that has that right problem or is potentially looking or would be open to discussing that as a solution? So what about their supply chain? So I had a call, last year with an ESG consultancy, and they were worried about deal flow, and they wanted to talk about marketing and authority marketing and lead flow. And I'm so we're talking through who you work with, and they told me they had just finished a project with one of the UK's largest retailers. I don't think it was, but let's say we call it Tesco for the sake of it right now. So they talk it through, and they put an ESG project through, and they had tangible results, and it helped them meet the legislation and criteria. And now they were coming to me and talking about lead generation over that. I said, well, hang on. So how many of Tesco's supply chain have you approached? So, what do you mean? I said, well, like if you've done it with Tesco, I would guess they've probably got like maybe 300 plus at least suppliers. Wouldn't it be in Tesco's best interest if their supply chain also, had this ESG suitability and qualifications? And so, well, yeah, right. And wouldn't it be in Tesco's best interest if they introduced you to those and partnered with you? So like, anyway, like this light bulb, it's so simple, and you're probably there thinking, well, Pete, I was expecting more from this webinar, but sometimes it is that easy. So they went off and they did exactly that, and I did that within like a 20-minute call with them. And the last time I spoke to him, I think he was booked up for about 2 years with the people that he has right now, and is frantically trying to train people and bring people into the fold. So it's called the bullseye method because you're going through the rings or the segments of a bullseye. So you've done this project. Do not just leave it. You should be able to create, 5 clients off everyone. Look at their supply chain. Look at their competitors, if ethical to do so. And then also look at the decision-making unit. That's what DMU stands for, who are maybe now in other companies. Make sure you're setting alerts. Use something like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and I'll show you a little bit about that later. But make sure you're setting alert to travel with those people to take that trust and familiarity. So again, I'm going to show you an example of how to do it with competitors. So here's an email template that you can borrow or steal. So subject, a question about specific pain point at company name. So hi Steve, don't know how relevant this is to you. We recently completed a project with client A where the specific result with numbers that you created, which is on track to, and what you did for them. The specific purpose of this email is to explore if the pain point is relevant to their company. Feel free to say no, but are you open to a brief conversation about how our approach might benefit their company? So let me make it more real for you. Say that you did a culture and organizational change and recruitment program, for Coke. And within that, you reduce their staff churn down from 28% to 18% for Coke. And ethically, there's nothing wrong with approaching Pepsi because you've now gone through Coke's supply chain and people they supply to, because supply chain is 2 ways. But now you're moving out to competitors. So question about staff churn at Pepsi. Okay. So I would actually put re-Coke. I would strengthen this up a little bit. I can't remember why I was kind of playing safe with this one. But hi Jane, I don't know how relevant this is to you. There's a psychology around this, the purpose of this is to get this read. So, I'm going anti what everyone else is saying. Hey, you need to read this now. It's more, I don't know how relevant this is to you. So the question immediately, a psychological response is, ooh, I need to find out what's this about. So we just completed a project with Coke where we reduced the staff churn down from 28% to 18% in the crucial first 3 months of new hires. This is on track to save them $700K this year and every other year. So the specific purpose of this email is to find out how relevant the challenge of staff churn is to Pepsi. Feel free to say no, but do you want to jump on a quick call to run through some ideas I have about how this specialist knowledge we developed could help Pepsi? Specialist knowledge. Facts, figures, results, similarity of organization. Do you think that would get you a meeting with Pepsi? I would suggest absolutely. So I implore you, immediately go back through your assets, underutilized assets that you already have, and have a look at what projects that you've got that you've not done anything with. And then you have your network. So I teach my clients how to download their network and analyze those based on strength of relationship and are they decision makers. So this is what was referred to in an earlier kind of testimonial a little bit called the network multiplier. So what we're looking for are A1s and B1s for decision making strength. A1 where you have a strong relationship because that's the relationship strength section there. So you're looking at your work at A1s first, then your B1s, and then influencers or even partners. So, we download our network and then we reach out to them. I've also shown you an example of the client insight interviews. So at this point, most consultants will tell me, look, Pete, I don't have a big network. I don't deal in, I don't thinks, or I think, or I don't know, or do this exercise. Get your LinkedIn network, download it. When you go out to contact them, be mindful of what I said earlier. Don't work your network thinking about it. Look, I'm going to analyze them and think about who is going to be a fit for this thing that I want to offer. What you should be thinking is, who can I get into conversations with and work out what my offer and what needs to be. But when you've downloaded your network, so this is a setup that I have in a CRM that I work with my clients to do, custom field for influence, relationship strength, so you can track your decision makers, strong relationship. Or again, this is another tool I give them, which is a more kind of Excel spreadsheet process. And you activate them and then you contact them. And again, I give my clients, you can, if you have a really strong offer, there's nothing wrong with going out and saying, hey, a lot of companies that I'm been talking to have this issue or are currently suffering with this, and we've developed a solution to that. Are you open to giving me some insight or giving me your opinion or giving me your ideas around this? Or you can go with the voice of customer, which is, in my world, the client insight interviews. Okay, so then, and the next abstraction out is signals and inflection points. So I'm going to give you some playbooks. So funding is a pretty easy one. Everyone knows about that, looking at people who've got Series A, Series B and reaching out. The challenge with that is, one, it's way overcrowded, and two, by the time you find out, it's too late. So in my consulting, I typically work with businesses that were at Series A, possibly Series B. So I used to have to kind of find those companies a year or 18 months before they were going for Series A, try and get them. I'd get them to put me in their pitch deck almost, that when we get the money, I'm going to bring these people in and these are what they're going to do. But it's hard. So I want to give you a couple of easier ones. So recruiting is a massively easy one that you can do. So these are just some examples. So this company here, bit at random, are recruiting for a director of operations. You could reach out to their CEO or the general manager and offer a plan B. Look, hey, I notice you're currently recruiting for a full-time director of operations. I could do this with my consulting, or I could do this as a fractional, or hey, look, you're recruiting this person, but we know, based on our expertise, in their first 3-4 months of working, they will need to do this. They will need to understand the current reality. They will need to get to know the team. They will need to audit this. They will need to do this. How about we start working on that right now? So when this person comes in, this high value candidate, you can have everything ready for them. Okay, so many, many different ways of slicing and dicing this, but it's easy for you to identify. LinkedIn will give you this data. And the beauty is, if you've never done it before, you've got 30, 60, 90 days of data of people doing this before, you've never contacted. Again, there's people hiring for fractionals at the moment. If they're hiring for fractionals, you can either enter into a conversation with them around fractional, but you can also enter into a conversation with them that if they bring in on fractional, do they need some style of consulting? Yes, absolutely. They probably do in some area. So inject yourself into the conversation. And it doesn't have to be with the hiring manager. Of course, it can be with the CEO or the VP or the managing director or the business development director. It really doesn't matter. And again, just a little trick, if you like. If you come across something that's really, really exciting for you, think, I could talk to that company about consulting, but it's through a recruiter. What I would typically do is just take a line or two from the job advert, copy it, put it in Google, and it will typically tell you who the company is because they would have advertised it on their own company website anyway. So there's a couple of ideas. Okay, this is great if you're doing AI consulting right now, that you can target organizations recruiting for lower level positions and bridge to consulting. So I did this with a UK consulting company that did RPA, robotic process automation, which is a little bit superseded now by, AI and everything that's come out. But we would look at people who were targeting lower level administration roles, because even if they weren't contemplating RPA, robotic process automation, they wanted people. What if they couldn't get the right people in sufficient numbers, in sufficient time to do the roles that they needed? Whereas one good RPA would run the same process as generally 5 administrative tasks. So it's very easy for us to identify people that might be a fit. So you look at all people who are hiring for these lower level positions and then target the right people. And that's a reason to start a conversation. And these are just some ideas for you. And I've got 100 more of these different ideas. Absolutely. If we ever speak, I can get one out. It's going to be maybe a better fit for you. And again, LinkedIn makes this easy for you. On your mobile, they've given you this new thing now called Catch Up, where every day Greg started a new position as a VP of Growth. Gary started a new position as the Chief Exec at SNA Partners. Ian started a new position of VP of Sales. These are all reasons to reach out. And if you look at this is one of a client last year, Jesse. He's brilliant at this kind of process. They are a content-led organization. They create playbooks and frameworks. So this was just a comment, I think, someone announcing their new role. And she was now announcing it was a new role as a CMO. Hey, we've got this CMO first 90-day checklist. If you'd like me to send it over. Yeah. And bang, they're in a conversation. So there's so many opportunities for you to do this. So we've now looked at the right frame and the right people. We've done 2. The remaining 3 fly by now. A question. With all these different approaches. So actually, I just want to go back through this one. People new in role and people hiring, they weren't a client, but they were smart. There's somebody I know. They built their entire business doing culture transformation, which is a hard thing to sell. And they did it by leveraging people hiring and people new in role at a senior level. And they even created their front end program to match the need of that new people coming into the business. And that was their one and only lead generation conversion process. And they worked it and sweated it really hard. So it doesn't have to be complex. So with all those different approaches I've just showed you, that really no one else is teaching B2B consultants, don't you think it's feasible to get into 30 to 90 conversations in the next 2 months? Please, if you're still here, play to my fragile ego. Let me know that there's still people alive. The chat box pops up. Thank you very, very much. While you do that, I'm just going to take a quick drink. Yeah. And if we do work together, I've got 100 more of these, but you don't need 100. You really just need one that you can swan and work. So the comments are still going. Thank you very, very much. So then third, we've got the sprints. You've got all this knowledge, but just don't do a lot with it. So we're going to look at the sprint activator. So when you launch a focused, high effort sprint, everything else accelerates. You create your own momentum. You start conversations before you feel ready, and you wake up to replies. You've booked calls, and then the most powerful shift of all happens. You start to remember what it feels like to win. No more spinning your wheels, no more passive hope. Just movement and results. And most consultants don't move. And when you see one or two quick wins land, that's when your belief locks in that I can do this. I can do this again. I can do this again. So we're going to look at 3 parts: know your numbers, front load your activity, and then move, then improve. So first of all, your numbers. So say you want 5 deals at 50K and your close rate is 10%, which is a ridiculously low close rate. Most consultants are kind of 60, 70%, but that's from your network. So I don't want you to say, Pete, you're making these numbers up. They're not realistic. I'm doing these to be really pessimistic. So you have to make 50 offers, whether you call those proposals or whether you run a pitch deck methodology, really doesn't matter. Okay. So if you want 5 deals at 50K, you need to be making an offer to 50 people in a year to get that type of deal flow. If you have live conversations, so strategy calls, whether it's 1 or 2, and I'm going to talk about how many you have in your process, you need to be making about 100 of those live person-to-person conversation. And again, with back and forth, you need to be talking about creating about 143 of those calls, because you will get drop-offs, you'll get cancellations and everything else. If you say, look, a 20% response rate from high first intent contacts with know what it takes, I will get in contact with them no matter what. I will do whatever it takes. You might say, okay, so 750 targeted individuals. You can do that in different time frames. You can decide to plan that out annually, small numbers, or you can decide to do that in the next 6 months, which will give you about 6.25 contacts per day. Or you can decide to do it in the next 3 months and really go hard at it as a sprint, which will give you about 12.5 per day. Or you could condense it down to 1 month and really go hard and start those conversations. But know your numbers, even if you're guessing to start with, take some of my numbers, but have some perception about the reality of your numbers in the effort it takes. So first of all, your numbers, and then front load effort. So most consultants come and I show them this, and I've kind of spared you. I normally add this in later. And say, look, let's build expanded business development cadence, and how to do, your business development in half an hour a day. And that's some of the that I see peddled on LinkedIn around the internet. No, if you're here because you're interested in getting your next 5 clients. You need to front load your effort to provide traction. You have to take massive action over a period of time before you can even think about building a standard business development cadence. And there will be times when you have your standard business development cadence that you have to jump in and take massive action again for whatever reason. Well, coincidentally, I typically find about 8 weeks is a good time frame for this front-loaded effort to provide traction, which coincidentally is about the same length of time as my upcoming Maven cohort, where you can work with me individually. And I'll tell you a little bit about that if you stick around and you think I've earned the right to share that with you. And then we've got move, then improve. So I've talked about the network multiplier, which is a process I take clients through to bring all of their network together and then analyze them based on decision-making, influencer, potential champion, or potential partner. But this is how most consultants process it. They go, okay, I've got 3K people in my network, so I'm going to process that, and that'll take me about 6 weeks, and then I'm going to start. You might be looking at me going, Pete, no, and laughing. But, I see it every day because consultants, we're analytical sometimes. We want to do the best, but no, move and improve. break it down into chunks. Process 250. If you can do 250 in a week or 2 weeks, process your 250, start, then move on to the next, process those, then start, process the next, then start. Move, then improve, not wait. Okay, so we're flying through these now. So we've done the right frame, the right people, sprint activator. So question, if you ran a sprint for 60 days of focused activity, does it feel right that you'd be able to get those conversations you need right now? Again, I'll take a quick drink and then we'll go on to the fourth section. With all the things that I've shown you, if you ran a high focus sprint for 60 days, does it feel right to you that you'd be able to get into more conversations or enough conversations to drive at least 5 potential opportunities for you? Okay, fantastic. Brilliant. She's still here. So then connect consistently. So most consultants think they have a positioning problem or a value prop problem. What they really have is a proximity problem. So we're going to look at connect consistently, where you look at your presence, your proactivity, and how you activate the marketplace. And all of that is compounding on the 3 that you've done. Typically, most consultants are not close enough to the market. They're observing it from outside, trying to guess what the buyers want instead of hearing it in real time or observing opportunities. And when you start to do some of the things I'm going to show you, it's like slicking on your reticular activating system. Suddenly you see opportunities or maybe buying signals everywhere. So here's an example from 2014. And there's a couple of reasons I included, I showed you this. So one, partly to show you, I've been in the game a fair while as well. I see so many people kind of teaching B2B consultants at the moment that, it just popped out of nowhere. And, I've got a couple of consulting clients themselves, and all of a sudden they want to teach consultants. So this is something that I want to show you. So I was just perusing LinkedIn and I saw this ad and it kind of popped in and I said, well, this is strange. Who is this company, New Voice Media? I didn't know them at the time. Why are they advertising this book from another author who is well known in the States, not so much in the UK, about growing outbound sales teams, really? So I had a skill set that I'd invested in before. I saw that. Most people would bookmark that, put it somewhere and say, I'll come to that. But I didn't do that because I had some skill sets. So I knew how to get email addresses back then in 2014, and I had some email templates, and I knew how to send emails to people. So about 5 minutes later, I profiled 1, 2, 3. So it shows here on the screen, Tim, Emma, Matt, and Stuart. And this is there's some psychology behind this. I won't go into it now. If you become a client, I'll show you why this works. But so about 5 minutes later, I got the emails of all of these senior people, pulled up a template that I knew worked because I'd invested ahead of time, and I emailed them. About 10 minutes later, I had a reply from the VP of Sales in New Voice Media, also referencing that I should be speaking to someone else who I hadn't emailed. I know about 10 minutes after that, I had a reply from the CMO at New Voice Media saying, hey, this is, thank you very much, but you also need to speak to this person, who they copied in. And about 10 minutes after that, I had a reply from the person I needed to speak to. And then about a week after that, I had a signed contract to create content for them. Because what I found out was they were an app in the Salesforce ecosystem that had built up through customer success and now moving into sales. And they weren't on my radar ever. I wouldn't have seen that in a consulting business that I was with, but I was present on LinkedIn and in my marketplace. And I noticed it and I thought, that's interesting. What's going on here? So I had a skill set and I reached out to them to get into a conversation. Literally about a week later, I think they paid me something like 5,000-6,000. And the content that I created, they've they've subsequently been bought out by Vonage. So my content is still live on Vonage. When I was consulting, that conversation probably created a couple £100,000 worth of consulting because they were pushing my content to my ideal prospect. If I'd bookmarked that ad and not come back to it, I would have lost out on a couple of £100,000 worth of consulting. be present, be aware. So the next one, Jesse, I don't know if he's on the web, but I know he registered, but he's a client. This is last year. I saw them advertising as initiatives. So they're a content framework-led business, and they were advertising to help people escape the corporate world and set up as consultants with the backing of their playbooks and everything. And I looked at that and thought, interesting. Didn't know whether they're a competitor or anything, but I started a conversation. Yeah, so that was in February 2014. So they then became a client. The first part of it in July, the second part, in June and July. And Jesse's allowed me to share. There's nothing absolutely wrong with this. But I was just interested. There was no intent. I had nothing to offer them at the time. And in fact, I created a different solution for them. And you think, well, these things can't be replicated. I think it was November last year. I was on LinkedIn and I saw a post about something. It was an AI platform for consultants. And I looked at it and I thought, interesting. I should start content with a conversation with these people. And I did. And that's turned into a consulting client. And in fact, it's allowed me to make an offer to you. And again, it's not just email when you see things. I've also shown you Jean, who was reaching out to CEOs of airlines. But it doesn't have to be email. This one makes me laugh every time. There's a brilliant book by Stu Heinecke, Get in the Meeting. And he gives this example of Dan Waldschmidt, who sends out swords as a direct mail package. It costs him like $150 and he sends them to CEOs and he's tracking when their revenue is declining. Yeah, so it's just about consistency now. And it doesn't have to be like, you can create your own. If you had a process to create these bobbleheads, I like some of the the weird and unique one. Is that going to get you into a conversation? If you did a bobblehead of a prospect that you wanted to speak to, and yes, it might cost you 50 quid or something. Of course it can. And there's these things, and these are video mailers. And I've got an offer from this company that will help me help you a little bit later on. But they design these packages. They help you create a video, and they send those out, and you can send them by FedEx and everything else, to the CEO or the VP that you want to speak to. And they get massive, massive engagement. So question, if you combine that focus sprint with a commitment to create conversations consistently with just a few of the approaches I've shown you, do you feel it's plausible to at least add maybe, another 25, 50% client revenue over and above what you create now? Please. Let me know you're still here. Play to my fragile ego, please. Drop something as a comment or a reply to that. Do you feel that if you did it consistently, front load with a sprint, and then built consistency, that you could add 50% more client revenue over and above what you create now? And if it's not 50, let me know what that number is. Okay, so you've seen the Get 5 Clients framework. We're coming to the point where we can transition. I do want to tell you about the cohort that I'm running. Then we'll go to hot seats, and then we'll go to Q&A. So the Get 5 Clients framework, the right frame, the right people, the sprint activator, and connect consistently. I want to give you a quick example of £35 million pipeline. It's really, really simple. So the targets were CTOs, COOs of the UK's top 500 organizations. So this was about 12 years ago. The value, we were looking at, so how do we create conversations with these people? So what we did is, as an organization, as the technology organization I was consulting with, we went out to a third-party research company and we paid that third-party research company, and it cost about £40,000. We don't need to do that with AI and tech now. But they created a piece of research about the emerging disruptive trends that were going to impact and their industry. So cost 40 grand, get it back. Part of the deal was we got the research company to put it on their website for sale at something like 2,500. Okay. This was, we were cold calling C-level execs at the time. So we cold called them and we offered them an executive briefing to them and their organization, outlining the research from this organization. And as a tangible value equation, they would leave 10 copies per organization of this third-party research that you could buy on their website for £2,500. So we were giving them a value-led executive briefing, which we controlled the narrative, and we were leaving them with perceived 25 grand's worth of research paper that they could distribute throughout the organization. We were setting something like 8 in 10 of the people we wanted to be in front of at a meeting. And obviously then there was a connection and a follow-up process, and it naturally led to the technology would help mitigate the risks of the impending doom that was outlined in the research paper. Yeah, so that opened up at least £35 million of the pipeline within 2 to 3 months. I wasn't there long enough to see how much of it they'd closed. But you can do most of this now with AI and research. There's a service called Winter will help you go out and do research. You can do AI. It's amazing. You can replicate anyone on this call, still on this webinar, can replicate that in their business. It doesn't have to be cold calling. It could be direct mail, whatever mechanism. Just stop and think, how can I replicate this in my business? Okay, so the recap. So you've seen how to start waiting for leads and start conversations. You learn how to turn your network into a warm pipeline in weeks, not months. And you've discovered a repeatable path to get your next 5 clients faster than ever. So do you feel more comfortable harnessing the power of business development in your consulting business? I'm hoping you would say yes. The reality, look, even if you only just use a tiny fraction of all we covered today, don't you feel like you've taken a gigantic leap forward with your business development? Even if you pick one thing, but implement it via a sprint and consistency. So imagine what you could achieve with me on your team, working on your team for 8 weeks, guiding you, holding you accountable, and adding the experience to shortcut your time to revenue on these and many, many more initiatives. Because this is only a slice of kind of my brain, if you like, and my systems. So I do want to talk about a little bit before we go into hot seat and Q&A. So my Maven cohort program is starting soon. How to get your next 5 consulting clients, the typical 8-week accelerator for B2B consultants who want more momentum, not just theory. And I do hope I've earned the right with the value that I've given to spend 5 minutes talking about it. So it's my 4-step framework that I've shown you. It's broken down into actionable playbooks delivered over 8 weeks to get you super fast momentum. We do twice weekly Q&As with hot seats and accountability. If you are on the fence and you want to join us and you look at the times of the calls and you think they don't work for me because of my time zone, jump in and I guarantee you I will put something on that works for you as a time zone. Even if it is just for you, I will make it work for you. This is the first time I've ever run a cohort on Maven, and I want it to excel. I want it to be the one that gets all the traffic from Maven, to get the best testimonials, and I want this to be an ongoing thing. So I will do whatever it takes. If you want, or if there's a time zone that doesn't work, jump in, because I need to see your commitment, and I will make it work for you. I absolutely promise it. And you get me on your team driving you to creating the opportunities to get your next 5 consulting clients. So imagine what it'd be like for a proven frameworks and playbooks and an experienced no BS advisor to keep you on the right path. How much more incremental progress would you make with me on your team for 8 weeks? And I'm quite a nice guy. Honestly, I don't bite. Okay, so you've already seen some of the results. You've seen Dr. Pete, you've seen Michael, you've seen Jorn, you've seen Scott, and you've seen others, and you've also seen the 35 million pipeline campaign, which I personally think is ripe for being reapplied right now. So what does it mean? So how to get your next 5 consulting clients cohort? It's not even close to a small percentage of that 35 million, kind of tongue in cheek. Not even close to a small percentage of 600K, which is what Michael Whelan created, or 172, the Peter book that wasn't even created. That was his booked revenue within, I think it was within 2 months. So the standard cohort investment is 1,900. The event attendee upgrade credit is 400. So what that means is, if you invest before 8 p.m. GMT, Sunday the 11th, the investment to jump in on the cohort is £1,500. Then you get into the cohort program, you've got a week, and then we go not Monday the 12th, we actually kickstart then on the 19th. So that gives me some time for some prep and some planning and to work with you. But most of the training courses and everything else, the prep stuff is already there. So if you're on the fence and you want to work with me, please, please, please jump in, because this is my first Maven cohort. I am going to do whatever it takes to make it a massive success for you. And best of all, it's not even about that, because when you enroll, I got some special sweeteners to make this a brilliant cohort. So we're talking about the client insight interview. So this is currently for sale on my website and has been sold in many other places for $279. I include that for free, and you get that pretty much the moment we go live on the Monday when it opens up after the deadline on the Sunday. So it's how to engage everyone from your network to completely cold contacts to run client insights interviews to give you your real-time voice of customer insight. How to take that knowledge and create offers for those very same potential clients. Some of my clients are using this as their main client generation method, and they don't do anything else. They're constantly doing client insight interviews, turning those into proposals, turning those into clients. One method. And one method is giving you direct feedback from the marketplace constantly. So you get that almost immediately. So remember, Dr. P said, I gained so much insight on my ideal clients that I naively thought I knew. And here's an experienced smart guy. Okay. You also get a full, I personally think it's best LinkedIn Sales Navigator training course available. It's mine. I sell this for £320. It's how to use LinkedIn Sales Navigator to track your ideal prospect and build your dream 100. How to identify prospects like your best clients, how to map out multiple stakeholders in target clients, how to take that knowledge and create real, genuine engagement opportunities that lead to conversation. So that's a full-on multi-module training program that sets you up. You go into a blank LinkedIn Sales Navigator account, you set up and you walk through everything that you need to do over my shoulder. So you get that immediately. So that's usually 320, and I give you that. And this one really makes my heart sing. So remember I showed you, being alert, and I did that second outreach. I did Jesse's and then the second one. So that client turned out to be, that conversation led to me working with a company called Theax.ai. They are the first AI platform specifically aimed at B2B consultants. So they operate on assessment tools and maturity assessments, and they help you run them as a lead magnet. They help you do it via benchmarking, and they help you do it as a way of showing you have a productized service and consulting model. And I'm really doing them a disservice. I really love the platform that they're building. So if you jump into the program, you get 2 months free for 2 users, and that's usually a £395 value. And they will onboard you and build your own unique either pre-assessment, a pre-sales assessment maturity model, or an audit assessment tool in their AI-enabled platform. They can't do it for free because there is some level of work involved, but they're in launch at the moment. It's $2,750, and they've agreed only for me and my people who jump into my cohort early. They'll discount that by 80% to $580. I say it's unexpected to get any, they will work with you. They will work with you to build your productized AI-driven consulting service. And you can do things like, getting individuals to take care. I'm doing them. It's an amazing, amazing service. And I will help. I will help you with this as well. And also, remember I showed you direct mail, lumpy mail, dimensional mail. So there's a company that does those. They source them for you. They design the packaging. They will create the video, or they will either create a video for you, or they will take your videos and make it look super professional. And then they get them, they will build the list. So their typical pricing is $3,000 for 25 mailers. Don't worry about the month. It's no commitment. So again, what they've agreed to do, much prodding from me, is they will do a full done for you dimensional mailer, create the video from scratch or utilizing your source material, editing, create the package design, build the list, the lot. You just need to, they'll send them to you, you just need to post them. So the upgrade is on the 3K plan, you get an additional 25 mailers. You get double. So it gives you 50 in total. Or they'll create a unique small plan of 10 for 1,500. So if you do have your hot 100, i.e. the clients that you want to win at all costs. Remember I showed you the Stu Heineke example, like 100% engagement. I'm not quite sure these would give you 100, but I reckon they're close to sort of 75, 80 percent engagement into highly, highly targeted individuals. So you get the client insight interviews, typically 279, then sales navigator mastery 320, £250 discount, and double credit on mailer. So again, if you enroll now, please, I'd love to see it. I really want to make this a success, both for me as the first time there on Maven, and for you to get you traction. So it's a 4-step framework, twice weekly Q&A, hot seat accountability. It's me on your team, driving you to create the opportunity to get your next 5 consulting clients. So how would you enroll? I'm hoping that's how you're asking right now. Use the QR code. That should take you to the page and automatically apply the credit, or go to bit.ly Maven clients. I say all of the special things end 8 p.m. Sunday. Even though the program doesn't finish till a week after that, I want to get people in, get them enrolled. It's a small group. I will do everything. If the times don't work, I will create a time that does work. If you're in the States or Australia, I will make it happen for you. So what you got to do, it should take you to there. It should have automatically added the upgrade credit. I do want to make a success of this for you. So Q&A and hot seat. Thank you very, very much. Blown through this. I do tend to go fast. So I now going to end the kind of the content piece and look at the question and look at if anyone wants to jump in and do a hot seat. So first of all, did anyone want to do a hot seat? Do you have a burning question that you would want to, if I can get you on video, that you say, hey, Pete, I'm quite happy to go on video? If so, drop a yes or something in the comments and I'll have a look at it. Okay, while you're doing that, I am going to look through some of the questions. So Santosh, it looks like you're saying that you want to come on video. So let me find you. Santosh, the only thing here, have a look. I may have disabled it actually in my settings. See if you can unmute yourself. I may have made.
Yes, I can unmute myself.
Hey, Santosh, fantastic. How the devil are you?
I'm good. I hope you can hear me clearly. I wanted to, kind of see and talk, but this is cool. So first, Peter, thanks a lot for this presentation. It was very useful. I was on and off, but very, very useful. My burning question is, I do no-code consulting, developing, technology products, AI projects, a lot of what you said for a lot of the kind of stuff that you said for clients. And I started recently about 6 months back and kind of struggling with finding clients and doing basically everything on the 5 pillars that you mentioned. My question is, as you would have noticed, a lot of these things are fairly, generic in nature. They can be applied to multiple businesses. And, wanted your inputs about, for somebody who's at my stage, how you would you recommend to niche down? Would you recommend to, try everything? And even in your focused outreach kind of approaches, would you recommend anything around that to increase the chances of success?
Oh, it's fantastic. And I mean, it's kind of how long is a piece of string question there. It because what we don't quite understand is your traction, how many clients you've won. So, for example, do you have clients that you've done a great job with already?
Yes, about 6 clients so far.
Okay. So, out of those 6 clients, what's the one that you've got the best result that you could prove? You say that we did the project, and as an end result, they were in this state prior to it, and now they have this.
Yeah, so I've got like a Australian housing client, and the best way to justify that is, we started off with one project, we ended up doing 6 projects for them. So and as a result of it, as a result of the benefits, they keep coming back with, requests, and that's one way that I could pitch for it.
Okay, fab. So, do they have competitors?
Oh yes, lots of them, lots of them.
Cool. Is it ethical to talk to their competitors in the country that you're dealing with them?
Yes, there's no constraint.
Okay, cool. So, have you done so?
Not really, actually, not really. And yeah, so cold outreach is kind of very new for me. So answer is no.
Okay, cool. Will you do so?
After looking at your course, I think I should start doing.
Ah, cool. So most people focus on the how, not the what. It's like, should I do LinkedIn? Should I do cold email? And you're like get your head up from there. Like focus on the bigger picture stuff. Hey, we got this client. They had a problem. We can prove the work that we did. We can prove the result. They speak very highly of us. There are other people with the same symptoms and the same underlying problem. I need to get in contact with them. Doesn't matter whether it's LinkedIn, cold email, direct mail, carrier pigeon. That part is really irrelevant. It's whatever it takes. Okay. Yeah. And
Yep.
I can work with you more if you want to jump into the program. Sounds like we can do some great stuff. Because then I'm assuming it's not only that country either. Because, we're looking at quick wins for you. If you can, most people can't prove they've taken a company from A to B. Whereas if you have, then you're in great stead. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. So I'm going to look at some of the questions. So Neil said, hi, Peter, just a clarification question with sprint numbers. Is that 750 initial meetings per annum? So Neil, feel free to unmute yourself if you want to. But yeah, I mean, it's whatever your numbers are, really, ideally. So what I'm looking at is 5 clients. Because that's the promise of the program. Because most people overthink things, and if it's too big, certainly B2B consultants, if it's too big, they overthink it and overanalyze it. So, I'm looking at, that's the promise of this. All the content was originated around that 5. So it's working up from there. So it's in whatever time period. Like most consultants I typically find would look at it and yes, apply this big amorphous time frame of a year because it's safe and it stops them confronting that they don't want to go and do something that might feel that's pushing them out of the boundaries a little. But there's no reason why you can't condense that down into 2 months or a month, and likewise, it doesn't have to be 750. What is better is they're your numbers, but just thinking about the process for you. Does that help?
No, it does. Yeah, it does. I get you. It's sales 101, have a target, then work backwards. And just out of interest, how long do you spend per day on LinkedIn prospecting? Just obviously the new voice media and things like that. I'm just interested to sort of get your take on that.
I think if I answer this one, I can hang myself a little because like, how long do you spend? Let's put it this way, Neil. How long do you spend?
So I've only just started up my business about a year ago, and I've got a couple of clients. We've connected on LinkedIn. So nice to make the connection. But I suppose the second piece would be, look, I can now just as a result of this webinar, I'm going to probably obviously be a bit more diligent about the time. But typically when I was in some of my sales roles, I used to say I'd block out 15, 20 minutes per day, and then it'd be all about posting something about my business. Now it's more just, I suppose, connecting with people and reaching out, and a number of automation tools that I use for my LinkedIn. So I probably spend a couple of hours per day on it. But I'm not sure if it's very targeted in terms of my hours that I spend.
Yeah. So I'm not going to directly answer your question because like I'm not you and I don't want you to be you and you don't want to be me either. Trust me. We really don't. But there's a difference between that standard cadence and motion, getting into motion. And it's trying to identify that. There's a couple of things I do want to pick up on what you said. So firstly, most people are focused on LinkedIn, but is a whole world of other things that you can do outside of LinkedIn. It does not have to be LinkedIn. A great book, if you really want to go a little bit old school, is get a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine, which I think is, I love the old books because the youngsters haven't read them. So it's The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. So Chet was, he headed up one of Charlie Munger's media companies, and what they identified was like 20% of the advertisers in the industry spent 80% of the money. So they stopped targeting the others and they just did whatever it took. And in those, it was a little bit older. But I mean, they used to send a lumpy mail, 3D mail, every month to the key people in those businesses. So don't just think and constrain your thinking to LinkedIn. The second thing is you don't make I'm guessing you're a year into a business. You're not paying your mortgage based on the time that you spent on LinkedIn. I guess you need to just, yeah. So like time it takes you to do something is not the result that you get out. So, it's doing what you have to do to get the result that you need. And if you're not very good at it, it will take more time. Or if you're just starting, it will take more time. And I'm going to blow smoke up your backside and say you can do it in 15 minutes a day. But there are places outside of LinkedIn. Don't focus on the time, focus on the result. And also there's something that you again, just a small thing you said. I've used and abused every LinkedIn automation tool over the years. I really have. I try and get my clients not to, for the exact reasons that I showed you. So the two deals, the one that I showed you from 2 deals from 2014 with Jesse and the Axe AI. If I was using automation and was not present on the platform, engaging with my audience or the market, I would not have seen those. And I wouldn't have messaged them. I wouldn't have gone, oh, that's interesting. And I wouldn't have originated those deals just by starting a conversation. And I think that's the risk with the automation. I mean, you used to be able to do like 1,000 connections a month. You can only now do round about 400 to 450. And I recommend you do them, but do them manually because you're then more on the platform. You are present. You're visible. It's that, reticular activating device. You can see what people are doing and you will engage in stuff much more. So it wasn't part of the question, but it's something I get you to think about. Does that help?
No, thanks, Peter. Appreciate it.
Okay. So I've got one from Liam. Where you identify a decision maker you are 100% sure you can help, do you have advice on how to handle ignored cold outreach or how to get around it? Liam, do you want to jump on? Do you want to unmute yourself? Are you still here? Just maybe to add a layer of context. If not, I will try and answer it.
Sorry, Peter, trying to find my button. Haven't used Zoom in a while.
Yes. I'm with you. Maven makes me use Zoom. I'm a Google house generally, but so
Same.
can you give me some more context?
I'm talking about the kind of things where it's you get that frustrating feeling where I'm like, wow, I am a perfect person for you, and I know it. How to get in the room with that person. I suppose how to move past cold outreach if it feels like if you're getting ignored. I suppose whether it's whatever medium you're using, email, LinkedIn, knocking on their door, however you choose to do it.
So why do you think you're a perfect person to jump in? In what context?
To be honest, one of the main ones recently is something you touched on earlier, where I see positions advertised, and they're advertising a full-time forever position, where it sounds exactly like projects I've done, which I can turn around in not forever and for cheaper as well. So mainly things like that recently, where I'm like, I could deliver that as a project instead of a role. I want to talk to you about it.
Fab. And how do you go about doing that? What's your, I guess, your strategy right now? What do you do?
If I can get an email address, I'll send a email with like a simple exec deck with it. If I can't, which is probably, I don't know, most of the time, maybe 80% of the time, I'll send a LinkedIn message.
Okay, cool. So, Liam, I would suggest that seriously consider jumping in to Accelerator or the cohort, because I think there's a lot more we can be doing there with you. The key is, again, it's a mentality and a frame. It's more about offering ideas and or insight. So if you're sending a deck in the very first meeting, you have just chopped your own, in the very first contact, you've just chopped your own feet off, metaphorically speaking, because you're pitching, not bringing ideas and insights to the party.
Yeah, makes sense.
And that's the biggest thing. And then, it doesn't really matter whether it's email or whether it's LinkedIn. And then also, if you look at, so that's the main thing. It's a mental state, is like ideas and insight. I want to offer, I've got some ideas or insight that might help you, as the frame. But then also look at when you go back to the recording, look at the outreach message that I did to New Voice Media. It's called multi-threading, but I multi-threaded within the same email. So it was actually an email that was sent to one person, but referencing 4 other people. And then the next email got sent to person B and referenced the other 4, I think 3 or 4. And it's a little bit manual. And it was taken, I think I've got the book. One as well. Let me. An old book. It's called The Power to Get In. I love old books that really aren't even digitalized. There's a hard to get book now, but it's called The Power to Get In. What it's doing is leveraging internal politics and power. So you're multi-threading, but visibly in a way that organization can see that you've sent it to different people. And that might be, one or two senior with 1 or 2 managers. So you're leveraging possibly power down. So there's a couple of different ways you could do that, but I would need to know just a little bit more. But I would say, yeah, don't pitch. Once you put a deck in, you're pitching, and consider what insights or ideas you could be given. Does that
Makes
help?
sense. Yeah, absolutely. Cheers, Peter.
Okay, so I'm just looking for the questions. If there's any more questions, or if you want to jump on a hot seat, then let me know. Santosh, message me via LinkedIn or email, and I'll try and work something out on that one for you. Any more questions? I'm just going through to see. So we got Neil. Anyone? Unmute yourself if you want to jump on. Any questions? Feel free. Do, do, do. Okay, so no one's asking any questions.
Hi, Peter.
Hello.
I had one question. So I run a design studio, and we work with a lot of climate tech companies. We do a lot of their like brand website messaging work. These are especially like IP led companies that are in deep tech commercialization. A lot of the folks that we work with, they don't really invest in marketing as much. In the sense that they're quite nimble and we operate with them too. But I feel like there's a little bit of convincing that's needed for people to invest in it. They think that it's okay to not have like a super professional website or anything, but they are also trying to land partnerships with like these big corporates for strategic investments and stuff. I'm curious how you would approach the first messages. I've been trying to like share like, okay, would it be okay like that I took a look at their website and I would like be happy to share like a quick audit or something. But haven't been hearing back a lot. So I'm curious what you would do.
So what problem that they have that you solve?
Just building trust and credibility before. So basically, these are very technology heavy companies. So they're often talking to like graphs and charts and not to the customer business values as much. And they don't visualize, like these are technologies that are not deployed yet, right? So we help them visualize that so that they can ramp up their pilots and partnerships and stuff.
So, and your position is that their website doesn't accurately reflect what it is that they do?
Yeah. Yeah, that it doesn't reflect accurate. Not that it's not accurate, it's too detailed. For example, most of these websites look like science papers, like research papers or journal articles, rather than something that's oriented towards the industry.
Yeah. Okay. And what's a typical deal size for you? If you did a website redevelopment or a content redevelopment, what would
Yeah.
that be in terms of a deal size?
It's anywhere between 10 to 25K, depending on the size of how many pages they're developing and like, yeah.
Okay. So look, there's lots and lots more questions I want to kind of ask is to really bottom out what the root cause of the problem is.
Yeah.
But what I would say is like it's a very, very crowded space because the people you're approaching don't understand the value proposition of maybe the things that you're explaining to me. And it's very difficult to get that across because what you'll immediately be seen as is a web development company or which are, I probably get 50 of those a day to some degree or other. So you've got to find a way, and your deal size is decent enough. You're not looking at, $1,000. You've got to find a way to maybe be different. So,
Yeah.
have you targeted, especially if they're fast growth, tech companies, is making sure that that you're not making the internal people look stupid, that you can do it in a way that's putting your arm around the internal people.
Yeah.
It's a very tough position. You've got to be very, very skilled to basically tell them that they're doing something wrong or bad. And even if you can do that contextually, when you're building and growing fast, which it sounds like some of these are, it's a matter of scale. Yes, it might be a problem or it might be an issue, but in relation to everything else that they've got going on, how important is it? So you could start with like the voice of customer, what I call the client insight interviews.
Yeah.
But that's hard. If you ever went down that route, you can get it by jumping into the cohort or read some books around voice of customer. But essentially, you have to put your ego to one side And you have to
Yeah.
reach out to, maybe are you targeting the CMO or the founder, depending on the business. And, you really have to ask for time, which is hard for someone to give, but interview them, show them why you're reaching out to them, ego stroke them, but not talk about your product. To understand how it fits, what you're doing or your redevelopment is fitting into their ecosystem. Because sometimes, and everyone it's going to be the same, sometimes we think the problem that we solve is like front and center and really important. And yes, you can prove ROI, but in the context of everything else they've got going on, it might not be that relevant for them to solve right now.
Yeah.
So, and it's like trying to inject that and work out how can I inject that into the green line. If you think about that, are they going for more funding, and people will be assessing them based on their ability to articulate their message on their own website, or, how it translates. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm much more, I'm quite creative around how I do outbound business development. So a slightly different way, which would take some gumption and investment, is you could go and interview their ideal client
Yeah.
and talk about their website or their presence.
Yeah.
And you could interview maybe 3 or 5 of those. And now you have a research piece that you could go back. So instead of, back in the day of cold emailing, we used to send out offers of video audits and stuff, but then you would only do them when they replied back. And now you can automate that. You can even do a video audit of their website or via AI, but now can you imagine going and saying, hey, I'd really love to work with you and see where you've been over the last couple of months. I can see the trajectory that you're working on. I understand the companies in your space. It's really important to articulate the business benefits of X, Y, Z. Quite delicate here, but really think we've got some new insights and ideas. So I went out and actually interviewed 5 of who we think might be ideal clients for you, to see how they perceived you based on your web presence, and pull that into a report. I would say that's going to be pretty hard to ignore, but it takes a bit of time and effort.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Neil, so the book that I recommended, one is called The Ultimate Sales Machine. There's another one which is quite hard to get. It's called The Power to Get In. It's a little bit dry, it's a little bit old, but it's quite good. It's more about large organizations and C-level execs. Oh. Okay, do we have any questions? So we still got people here. It's either you love my Welsh lilt, or you're looking and waiting for
Sorry,
someone else.
Neil here. The Power to Get In, is that by Michael Boylan, is it?
It is, that's the one.
Perfect. Thanks, Meg.
It's really good. Okay, so you're either waiting for someone else to ask a question, you're not stepping in. Well, I think if no one else has a question, I'm not going to force it. I'm not going to add any more content. So, a couple of things. It's been fantastic. I think the content seems to have resonated really well. Like I say, my intent was to prove value, that I know what I'm talking about, that, and I've been in this game a fair while. I'm launching my cohort. The early bird or the incentivized offers go away Sunday. It's ridiculously cheap, really, 1,500 quid to work with me and a group of your peers for 8 weeks. The links will be on the recording and everywhere else. And I'd love to speak to you. I'd love to get you jumping into that cohort. And if no one's going to add anything else into the comments, then I'm going to sign off, call it a day, and say bye-bye. Thanks all.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. Bye-bye.